right, you guys, this was part 2 of our episodes with Mick. This is the second episode, so if you didn't see the first episode, make sure you go back and see that one. It is very triggering, so be very careful and tread and be ready, because it is that. It is very triggering. We thank him so much. However, this is part 2 of the series with Mick. Oh my God, Mick, I appreciate you. I know that this is just the beginning of your story, and I know there's so much to unveil, to discuss, and things of that nature. But you have a lot of amazing positive things that have also happened as well. So let's talk about your healing journey. When did this start?
It started when I was 30.
Okay.
Now, I said I only discovered about ACEs 3 years ago. So the major part of it has been in the last 3 years. But there was a significant moment when I was 30. I held my daughter after she was born. And it might sound daft, but the moment I held my daughter and looked into her eyes, I knew, because I didn't want kids. I didn't want kids for years and years. Didn't want kids because as far as I was concerned, I didn't know how to bring up a kid. I had no examples. The moment I looked into my daughter's eyes, I knew how not to bring up a child.
Right.
And one of the proudest moments I ever had. The reason I wear glasses is I walked into a shelf and damaged my eyes. And for another reason, another story, I try not to swear. I very, very rarely swear. And my daughter was there when I damaged my eye, and she was in the other room. She was 17. And I hit the ground and I swore because it hurt. And my daughter came running into the room, and the first word she said was, "Dad, that's the first time I've ever heard you swear." I've raised 4 daughters. The oldest one is 31. The youngest one is 9. I've never hit one of them. I've never raised my voice to one of them.
Thank you. Now, I will share this with you. I always share something good. I will share this with you. Since my awareness of ACEs, I don't yell either. Yelling could be seen as emotional, depending on who looks.
It's humiliation.
It really is. And I don't do it. When it comes times for whoopings, I used to be a parent that whooped because it happened to me. But with my understanding of ACEs, I don't do that anymore either. So this is what we do as cycle breakers. Really, we change the narrative. The things that we thought were normal, okay, really aren't. So kudos to you for not doing the things that were done to you, to your daughters. Congratulations.
I do have a connection with the kids I work at, but we also, I escaped, and this is the weird thing, I escaped into fantasy world. I'm sat in my toy room at the moment. I have to share it with my youngest daughter because she realised that Dad's got a toy room. I'll just scan the camera around. You might not get it, but it's just full of toy soldiers. I have thousands and thousands of toy soldiers. And I was one of the first people in the world to play Dungeons and Dragons.
Hey.
And one of the first people in the world to play LARP, live action role play, which is where you do Dungeons and Dragons for real. So you get dressed up as elves and goblins and hit people with rubber swords.
Oh.
And about 20 years ago, my wife, who also does this, we started using it in schools. Teaching through it. So if you want to solve a magical puzzle, you've got to do a maths question to get the chest open. There's a lady who introduced me to Clubhouse, runs a summer school in America. And all they use is a Dungeons and Dragons LARP thing. And they teach science through it. So if you want to make a magic potion, you have to go out and get some ingredients and do a bit of chemistry.
Right.
But what I found was that kids from trauma backgrounds, kids on the autistic spectrum, loads of them were turning to this. And the theory behind it is it's a safe world with rules.
Mm-hmm.
You can fail miserably as your character, which children understand because they play computer games. But it's not you failing. The character's failed. You get a new character, you start again. You can understand the idea of failure, because one of the things that so many kids I work with have is this problem with failure. I know I had it. I said I'm intimidated by academics. I was told at 13, I was in a class called Remedial English. I was told at 13 I wasn't good enough to get a degree, which is why I got a degree, because I was rebelling. It's the only reason I stayed on at school, to prove everybody wrong.
You too.
And I was the first person in my family to get one. So in some ways it has, I don't believe my trauma made me. I made me
Right.
in spite of my trauma. However, it definitely, you have to respond to the environment, and you're going to respond one way or another.
You're welcome.
And therefore for me, I just had this thing about, I suppose I want to teach children, and I don't want kids to go through what I went through. That's why I get triggered. If I see, even on the Perfect 10 page, I don't believe in using imagery of children for any reason to promote. You'll see it sometimes with charities, some wonderful charities, and they'll do a campaign, and there'll be some poor kid in black and white filming, sat on the bottom of a staircase, and everybody's crying, and that triggers me. So the only child you see on the Perfect 10 Club is me. Every picture on there of a child, unless it's a cartoon or a whatever, but if it's a genuine photograph of a child, it's me when I was a child. And I don't know, it's given me an understanding. It's the language. I met a lady this week. She came to the school. She's a singer. I'll send you a link to some of her stuff. I met her through an ACEs charity was promoting her because she sings about ACEs.
Oh, really? Okay.
All her original stuff is about ACEs. And then I found out she was playing near us. So we went to see her.
Okay.
But she wasn't being allowed to sing any of her own stuff. She was having to do cover stuff. And when I from the audience said, "Oh, are you not doing any of your own originals?" She got permission, and that sort of freaked her a bit. Somebody knows my own stuff. We got talking to her and found out she actually lives around the corner from us.
Wow.
So she came out to the farm. She's a perfect 10. She is a
Really?
perfect 10. And
Huh?
we sat down for a while, and there was various other staff around. And then at one point we were left on our own. And there's a connection. You know, I said there's a connection with Sarah Halmaraz. There's an understanding. There's a language. There's a something, and I don't know what it is. To be
No.
honest, I don't care what it is. It's a way of communicating, and there was just so many things that we knew, that we thought, that, and the same with Sarah Almaraz, the way I connected with her. And obviously it's similar. And when you think that, we're talking sort of people who continents apart, and I've now been in touch with people all around the world, from Japan to China to India, Canada. ACEs is a global thing.
It is.
And since I've started investigating it, and just said, right, I am going to shout about it. So that's what it's motivated me to do. And the more I've looked into mine, and as I say, I'm at the stage in my life where really it's irrelevant. I don't hate. I refuse to hate. And I don't know where that came from. That came very, very early on in life. As far as I'm concerned, to hate somebody takes a lot of effort.
Right.
You've got to go out of your way to hate somebody.
You're right.
So I don't hate. I don't forgive. That's come very much, I suppose, from Sarah Almaraz and Dr. Bakari. The idea of unforgiveness. What was it? Dr. Bakari says, you may heal into forgiveness. You don't have to forgive to heal.
Right.
And since my mother has admitted it was premeditated, that for me is unforgivable.
Yeah.
She comes from, don't get me wrong, she comes from a trauma background, but I put a post up today. In the end, to hurt somebody, that's a choice. You know, you have the choice. You know what's right and wrong as an adult.
Yeah.
What we're finding with the kids, and it's what's inspired me, is the more I found out about it, and the more I've talked about it, I'm getting quite bolshy now. So when we get a kid arrive, they might come with some sort of social worker, inclusions officer. Hopefully they'll come with a parent. And we look at the parent as much as we do the child.
Absolutely.
And we are brutally honest with the parents. Because if they're coming to us, they've reached a point where they can't get them in school, they can't control them, they're not sleeping, anxiety, whatever it is. And so many times we are finding it's the parents are continuing, even if it's not deliberate. You know, they're causing some sort of attachment problem or some sort of sleep problem or some sort of issue with this. And because of the theatre background, because I have this knowledge of every sort of facial expression, intonation in the voice, there's very little gets past me. But what I've found, and it's through people like Stacey that really put me on the sort of healing journey thing, that I've become, I'm just, well, that I've always been, I'm brutally honest.
You have been since I've met you. Yes.
Honesty I value above everything else. If a kid is doing, where we teach, we don't have a behavioural policy.
Right.
If people ask us what our behavioural policy is we say we expect the children to behave appropriately. Now, appropriately can be different for a different child. So we've got, we work with one lad, he's a selective mute, very high on the autistic spectrum. Appropriate behaviour for him is not the same as appropriate behaviour for some of our other students.
Right.
And the only rule we do have is what we call the ODF rule, which is the own dumb fault. So if I say to you, don't climb that tree, it's not safe, and you climb that tree and it's not safe and you fall out of it, I will pick you up, I will patch you up, but I will say, well, that was your own dumb fault, really, wasn't it? You were told not to do it. And again, it's putting boundaries, and it sounds harsh. We have a no restraint policy. We do not restrain under any circumstance.
Good.
The only circumstance we would restrain is to save somebody from serious injury.
Okay, good.
So obviously, if a child was about to jump in front of a car,
Right.
I'd stop them, but then I'd let go. The UK, it is legal in a school to restrain a child to maintain order.
Okay, good to know.
It's legal. But then again, in the United States, the only person you can legally hit in all 51 states is a child.
Right.
And it's the same in the UK. You can't hit an adult, assault, but if you hit a child, it's punishment. And that to me doesn't really add up. And it's that's what the healing journey's done for me. It's not been the little things concerning me. It's suddenly I've suddenly, because I'm in touch with Youth Underground, Rasha Hammond, who's the CEO of that. Again, I met her on Clubhouse. And they're a big anti-trafficking thing based in Geneva. And seeing the extent of it, you know, this thing is global. It is huge. Seeing some of the research that's been done in America on ACEs, I mean, you know, even because I've started like delving into Parliament and select committees and all sorts. So I've come up with reports. The UK have actually, for all they don't have a trauma policy, the government of the UK has costed it.
Why?
They know how much ACEs are costing them per annum in England and Wales.
Well, yeah, that's in the United States too. I think that's the reason why I'm happy that there's updates, but there's just going to be updates. I don't think there's going to be anything done.
But they don't have an official policy because there's no protocols. That's their wording. No protocol. And I'm thinking, well, come up with some protocols quickly. If it's costing that much, and we're talking billions,
Billions. Come up with
there, there was a select committee MP went to visit the only youth offenders institute in Scotland. So we're talking teenage criminals, basically. And in Scotland, because it's small, it's not that huge population in Scotland, they have one institution that is dedicated to teenage criminals.
Right.
And the moment he got there, the governor of that institution, and I've seen the official government report on this, turned around and said, every single one of my inmates, every single child in here has a high ACEs score.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah. And it was since I've been over the last 2 years discovering all these things, seeing the stuff that you were doing, meeting LP and seeing the different things that are going on there. And it is I mean, LP sums it up, it is a worldwide epidemic.
It is. It is. And I hate that just because it costs so much, and granted, things cost a lot, but we shouldn't neglect it or not do anything because it costs so much.
But what the government is saying is that this isn't costing, this is the cost they've done is for days off work, people being ill, mental health effects. So they've actually said the triggers, the effects of all these things is costing the economy 40 odd billion pounds a year.
Yep.
But we're not going to do anything about it.
That's what it is.
You're still allowed to restrain a child in school. And I've been campaigning and we've won a couple of victories. The local authority has now stopped funding the training. They introduced a thing in this country called Team Teach.
Okay.
Private organisation. Now, when I was taught to team teach, what that meant was you had one or two teachers in the room and they worked with each other to teach.
Right.
Team teach, and I've got their workbook because one of my daughters had to do it. It's basically how to restrain a child. And they call it team teach because there's always two adults that will do the restraint. And they don't use in their training document, and schools were paying to have these people to come in and train their staff to do it. And I've seen them in schools restrain children who suffer from sexual abuse.
So they're punishing the
not
kids that are.
Yeah. And our attitude with them is, they are going to be aggressive. And don't get me wrong, I took a couple of right hooks to the chin. The last one was a little lad. He was tiny. He was only about 8. He hit me 3 times. But I said to you, and it did hurt. He had a good right hook. And I'm not recommending this that all teachers do this, but I do have this thing, and it's possibly where one of the benefits of my childhood is. Violence is irrelevant. I just stood in front of him with a stupid grin on my face. My co-worker behind me was in hysterics because after he sort of pulled the 3rd punch, and he looked at me and he stamped his foot and he said, "It's not fair. You're more stubborn than me." But we've got a 15 farm, so if he needs to run, he can run. So why grab hold of him? And if he's been abused, you don't grab hold of a kid that's been abused. That's abuse. All you do is put more abuse on top of abuse. Right. And as you can see, when I'm talking about the thing, I was sexually abused as a child. I was trafficked.
Right.
However, the violence was the thing. And that came through my mother and my stepfather. The violence was extreme. And that's the bit that for me that I take into my work. People say about kids, for me, the big thing is don't threaten them.
Right.
And a threat can be anything. A threat can be, at the end of the day, you've got to sit through a 20-minute meeting to apologize to so-and-so. Well, that's actually a threat to a child. And it's also a waste of time because most of them have prepared the answers. Because they know what you're going to say to them. They've been there before. Right. So they go through the motions. They don't really learn anything. Now, that's not to say a child hasn't got to be aware of actual consequences. That's not imposed punishment. But if I throw that book into that puddle, I can't read the book. That's the actual consequence of that action.
Now you
But we
said
can get it.
the past 3 years, you've understood your ACEs, you've worked in the schools, you've done what you had to do. As far as ACEs in the schools and the things that you've set up have been wonderful because you're heavy on play. You talked about your soldiers, which I love. I think that's amazing, and how they're actually doing this inside of classrooms. How is that working for your students?
Remember I mentioned because I suffer from imposter syndrome.
Okay.
I never believe anything that is, and I've only just learned about imposter syndrome.
I was going to say that.
I did another quiz and I scored 20 out of 20 on that one. So we were using this method in schools for 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And after 10 years, I suddenly found out that it'd been given a name, and there's a university in Sweden that I'm now in touch with that has a whole department dedicated to this.
Okay, good.
There's a school in Denmark that only teaches using this method.
Okay, good.
And they've given it a name, EduLARP. We were doing it for 10 years before this. So I've now been in touch with them.
Tell us the name one more time.
EduLARP. It's actually the name of our website.
Okay.
We've got two websites. We've got the Seedling website and we've got EduLARP, which is linked, EduLARP UK. I'll send you the links through and then you can have a look at them because that looks at some of the trauma courses and the different bits we offer.
Right.
The effect is in that school, every day I went into that school, every class, every corridor, I was seeing kids restrained, kids being suspended, police being called, kids up on the roofs. We worked there for 2 years. I didn't have a single incident in 2 years.
Right.
We don't have an incident. If a kid needs to be angry, then they've got to be angry. We work with them outside. Okay, be angry. Right. We're not precious about anything. We don't. So if a kid kicks off, and they will, if a kid kicks off, the next time they turn up, there's no meeting with what we're going to do about it. It's that we start at that point. Because when you're working with kids, especially kids from trauma, because there's been some research done recently, and I've got to look up more about it, to do with the endomorphines. So in the brain, if you're going to a party, your brain starts producing endomorphins in advance of going. So you get excited about going. Some research, I think it's from Holland or Denmark, I'll check. And what they've looked at and found out is that if you know something is going to happen that isn't pleasant, the night before, your endomorphin levels crash. Your brain also prepares you for unpleasant things. So if you're in a school situation and you know every time you've kicked off, you have to go for a meeting with so-and-so and be in an isolation room for so-and-so when you go back in the next day, before you get back in the next day, your endomorphin levels have crashed. So you're already on a down. So it's a threat. That's why these kids are seeing it as a threat. That's why they'll get anxious about going back into school because they have to have this preparatory meeting. We've got to go and sit with the deputy head and the social worker, and mum's got to sit there and be told off. Right. Who wants to see your mum get told off by a head?
That is true.
That's humiliating. Yeah. And a lot of these kids are very protective of their mum, especially if there's an attachment thing there. I had a parent a couple of days ago saying they'd gone in for a meeting with the head. Their child had been suspended for a couple of days. They'd been called in for a meeting, and the head he said it was like being told off as though I was a school child. Your child's done this, your child's done that. Their answer to this child is give him a desk in the corridor so he's out the way. Yeah.
It's a lot that needs to be done over there.
What we're doing now is we're switching, because I can only teach a set amount of kids. And well, like, we've got more staff work with us, but it is limited. So what we're now, and it's what we started putting forward and trying to push, is we're now looking at training other teachers.
Oh, good.
We're offering trauma-informed practice courses.
Good.
People, anybody, not just teachers, social workers, whatever.
Good
And
for
our
you.
concept behind that is it's not dealing with the individual trauma of a child. It's thinking, and it's almost like disabled inclusion.
Mm-hmm.
Think about it in this way. So I have talked to trauma victim after trauma, childhood trauma victim after trauma, who has the same trigger point of somebody standing there on their shoulder.
Right.
And endless amount of people find that triggering.
Mm-hmm.
Now you think of a classroom, you get 20 children in a classroom, all sat at desks, they all start work because the teacher's just giving them some work. What's the first thing the teacher does? Gets up and walks around the back of all those kids to look over their shoulder to see what they're doing. And then one kid looks up from the test, gets told off for it.
I worked it.
You see what I'm saying? So that's what we're trying to get out there, is don't standing up. I was working with a special needs teacher when I was in mainstream.
Mm-hmm.
Really not good guy, done some excellent work with children. And I told a child off once, and it was in the drama class, and he was being dangerous, being silly and dangerous. I called him over and said, look, you were acting like an idiot. Went, come on, yes, sir. And he went off. And this special needs teacher, who was head of special needs, looked at me and said, oh, you did that wrong. I went, oh?
Right.
What do you mean I did it wrong? And he said, well, you sat down. I said, yeah. He said, well, the child was above you, so you didn't show him any authority. And my response was, well, I just wanted to point out he was being silly. It wasn't a discussion about authority.
Right.
Why did I have to impose that power over that child? That wasn't the issue. If I had stood up and towered over them,
You would have
that would have forced. And again, if that child is from a trauma thing and has got some going home every night to his dad towering over him and whatnot.
Right.
This thing about look me in the eye when I'm talking to you. Well, some cultures it's rude to look in people's eyes.
It is.
And also, they might be terrified of looking in the eye because every time they look dad in the eye, it hits them.
Right. See, and not to say this in a negative way, so please don't get me wrong, but your triggers and your past traumas helps you deal with your students. And it makes you relatable. They don't know your story, but the things that they're going through shows, which makes you that teacher. I didn't
But this is what I've done. This is what the ACEs has done for me by discovering the ACEs.
Yeah.
And by being told people like Leah Abraham said, get curious. So I got curious and I'm naturally curious.
Yes.
If I see a big red button, I press the big red button. I want to know what happens. Yeah. But as I said, what I'm doing is, or trying to do, and don't get me wrong, at times it has been extremely painful.
Right.
I still can't look in a mirror.
And that's okay.
But I'm using myself as a case study.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
So when some kid comes in and reacts in a certain way, I've got the perfect case study. I've been there.
Yeah.
So I know how that kid feels. I've been the new kid in a school 13 times.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
I've been the new kid in the school 13. The worst one is being a new kid in the school, having lots of enemies, going away, and then being sent back to the same school 6 months later.
Bullying is now, it's just so you know.
It also doesn't help being ginger. But it's little things like that that actually are so useful to know. So when I was little, I had a Northern England accent, very distinct.
Mm-hmm.
I then moved to the south of the country, as far south as you could get, where everybody had a very southern, what I would have called a posh accent. So I was this new ginger kid who stuck out like a sore thumb. I mean, I had bright ginger, stuck out like a sore thumb, wouldn't talk to people anyway because I was terrified of my own shadow by this point. Knew I was only going to be there for a couple of months. Talked completely differently. We were in the south of England for about 4 years. I just about picked up the accent when my mother moved back to the north of England. So I now had a southern accent, but I was back in the north of England. We were in the north of England for about 4 years. I just about got my accent back, and she moved to the Midlands. Different accent again. So, but I see that with these kids. So
Yes.
you'll get some kid out, and he's just moved to the area, and nobody's taking into account that kid doesn't fit.
Right.
You know, and unfortunately, like it or lump it, human beings have a nasty habit of fitting on things that don't fit,
No,
that isn't the same as them.
you are correct. You are correct.
I
And,
was looking for little things like that.
those
And
are
I ask awkward questions.
yeah.
That's it. I mean, I said about we give the parents a hard time. So if some kid is doing something, they've learned it from someone.
You're right.
So it might not be that the kid's being allowed to play a computer game. However, we just found out again, another one of the kids we work with, mum's addicted to them.
Wow.
She's
Well,
playing
kudos
adult games.
to you for being the person that, even though you just made a statement and said that some of those behaviors are learned, you were aware of those behaviors and didn't do that at all. You don't do that with your daughters. You don't do that with your students, your coworkers, because what it sounds like is for some people that's a normalcy, and it really isn't at all. You got to also understand, whereas when you were growing up, you might have thought it happened. It's not okay. It's not okay.
The worst knock-on effect, and again, I can see it with the students. So we watch the tactile thing. I have no recollection at all ever of my mother telling me that she loved me or giving me not
okay.
one. Therefore, my eldest 3 daughters, I hardly hugged at all. And daughter number 2 is as bad as me. She really just, and I've discussed it, they follow the perfect 10. So I'm open about this. I have made a huge effort because there's a 15-year gap to daughter number 4.
Okay.
Started again.
Okay. I get
and I'm
that.
making a huge effort. My wife, it took her 3 years after we got together to get me to take hold of her hand in public.
Bless your heart. Well, I'm here for perfect.
It has that. That's what ACEs does to people.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And I've passed that tactile thing on to my daughters without knowing. I think it's a Native American saying, is it takes 7 generations.
And you're doing what you're doing is healing. Congratulations, because that's what you're doing. And just know that healing journey is not timed. It's not at all.
Yeah, it isn't. It's not linear either.
No.
I mean, that's the one thing. I mean, people say, because it's weird how it changes, you know, because you start off on it and then you suddenly realize it's just ongoing. Because I did a post recently about the effects it's had on me, and I suddenly realized, because if I could, I would take my mother and my stepfather and forever, and I would change my childhood. I've heard people say they would, because they're happy with where they've arrived at the gifts it's given them or whatever. I'm of the opposite opinion. If I could change my childhood, and I'd take the risk that I'd be somebody else. As far as I'm concerned, my childhood was stolen, and I can't get it back.
Yeah, and I hate that, but I will say this: we have our opportunity now, and you're making your impact and you're doing what you're doing. So we have to keep doing that. I think the thing that I love is that you will be that person. Everybody's going to not only hear this, but they're going to see this. You already have Perfect 10. You already have your students. You have your wife. You have your girls. Congratulations. Because at the end of the day, this is what we need. What I plan on doing, just so you know, this information is out there. It's streaming on all social media platforms, on all podcast platforms. They're going to hear your story. They're definitely going to hear your story. And then there's going to be someone else. Just like when we were in the live last week, there was somebody else there from the United Kingdom. It is out here, but we have to do what we do. I'm going to commend you even more now by knowing your story all the way now, and help you as far as just education in general, with different things that can help your journey. I thank you. Now, give us a little bit more about Perfect 10. Where can we find it? Can people go and add you as a friend? Where can we find Perfect?
Yeah, it's a public Instagram page. So if you type perfect, it's the Perfect 10 Club, all lowercase, no spaces. And the reason I say that is because there are some interesting Instagram pages that are also called Perfect 10 or whatever. But there's no hyphens, it's just literally lowercase the Perfect 10. If you're on Clubhouse, there's links there anyway. Our company name is Seedling Productions, as in a small tree. And if you put Seedling Productions into Google UK, we will come up first. If you put Edularp into Google, we will come up first because we're the first people to do it in the country. So we're quite easy to contact. I'm also on Threads. I've started the Threads thing. I don't really understand it yet, but I am doing.
Me neither, but it's okay.
And that's the Perfect 10 Club again, because it just transferred everything across. We're beginning to look now also, because I've just been appointed as education officer for a national ACEs awareness charity.
Yay. Okay.
So I'm now going to be getting involved in some sort of highfalutin stuff with Parliament and the LEAs and various other bits and pieces. So I have really, in this last 3 years, started becoming a bit of an activist and screaming and shouting about it.
And I'm super.
But it's surprising once you get over that initial, I'm going to talk about it. And one of the biggest rewarding things about it is the fact that you too realize that you're not on your own.
That's right.
One of the worst things about it is you realize how much company you've got. Exactly. That's the terrifying thing.
That's a quote. That's a quote.
So, but yeah, so I mean, I will send you all the links as well, so you can have a look at the websites, and then you can add them on to any of your bits and pieces. But if you go to the Perfect 10 Club on the Instagram, that will take you. And there are a couple of posts on there that actually feature our other web pages and bits anyway. But you can't do it on Instagram for some reason. You can't do a decent bio on there. It's a really short bio.
I have a favor. I have a good favor. I know that I revised the ACEs quiz. I did. But now I'm thinking what I would like to do, because I never did add that additional question. Would you like to share that with your friends in the United Kingdom? Okay. Yeah. I actually have.
Yeah. Because I'm really interested in what you've done with the ACEs quiz. And the reason for that is because I got involved in a conversation to do with race.
Okay. Actually, I've been in meetings after meetings. When the CDC gave me the approval to do it, because I did the study already, I got permission to redo it based on the fact that when I did my study, the questions that's on there now are some of the questions that I was interested in. And so I'll send it to you. And I have a consent form because I actually have it in schools right now, but because it's a survey for people that are 18 years of age and older, if they're younger, I have a consent form. So I'll send the consent form. I'll everything, because I want to make sure if they're younger, and I do have it on there asking age, if I can get their consent. So yes, I am the researcher of researchers. I have all that information, and I'll send that to you too. I think you're
yeah, yeah, I mean that is a side that I'm fascinated by, and I'll talk to you more about that because I've done a lot of research on different bits and pieces. A lot inspired by Sarah Almaraz.
Yes.
Because I asked dumb questions, and I said to her one day, and this might sound a dumb question, I said, "Does race impact your trauma?" I said, "Because I don't know.
It does.
I'm white, brought up in a white country." And she turned around and said, "Don't be ridiculous. Of course it does." So I then asked some more questions, and it goes down into adoption service.
Yep, it's a lot.
So I've been talking to a lawyer in America. He's a child advocate lawyer, ACEs activist. He's mixed race, and he said when he was taken into the adoption service, said he didn't get a place. It was ages before he was placed, and placing his family together was even harder. And of course, it hadn't occurred to me that sort of Sarah Almaraz was saying that she had to be taught how to speak English in order to go to court.
I'm telling you, this is the reason why we have to continue to do what we're doing. Are you willing to continue this ACEs awareness journey with me?
Oh yeah, I'm there for the duration.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you. I actually, again, want to let everybody know how amazing you are. You can find Mick everywhere as far as social media is concerned, especially on Instagram, the Perfect 10 Club. You guys can find me everywhere. You know, I'm Dr. VicTORIEus. I'm everywhere. Be victorious in some places. But let me tell you, you guys have a victorious day. We're going to end this right here, and we're going to see you guys soon. Thank you guys so much for everything.